Redditors from small towns, what was your town's big scandal dirty secret? Please like, subscribe and comment so I can create more videos for you. Students were not supposed to leave campus for lunch. Some students were allowed to leave campus. They might be gone for some time. It turned out they were going with one of the secretaries to the nearby National Guard armory, and were drinking and fucking some of the guardsmen. These were 15-17-year-old girls. We did end up on Below Riley for a very brief segment. 5 students and a teacher committed suicide all within a week of each other. The youngest was 8 years old. All cases were unrelated and murders and suicides are very common in my town, so our 5,000 plus population keeps dropping. Several dozen tourists parked their cars on the frozen lake when it wasn't adequately thick ice. Their cars went for an unexpected dip in the lake. The whole town was talking about it, but everyone was split between sympathy for the people and those who thought it was funny that the tourists hadn't thought their parking choice through or bothered to ask a local about the ice. It actually made the town a little tense for a while, with half the people thinking it was shitty that some locals thought it was funny, which is fair, and the other group thinking it's okay to laugh at the city folk being a bit naive, which is kinda fair too. There was the first idiot, then everyone assumed it was safe after that. An ex-friend of mine from high school beat his non-verbal autistic 5-year-old son to death and hid the body. It will be a year next month and they still haven't found his body. What? If they didn't find the body, how do they know? Did he admit to it? What about the child's mother? How utterly dreadful. Music teacher in my grade school molested several students, probably over the course of a few years. As I remember, students talked about it, but he remained our teacher for quite a while, and didn't even get convicted until 4 or 5 years ago. Some lawyer's wife went missing. There was a big search effort to find her, including Air Force jets flying over the surrounding woods to find recently disturbed ground, indicating a possible burial. They couldn't find her for days until finally a neighbor went to the media to point out the lawyer had remodeled the sitting area in his garden recently, including pouring himself a nice big concrete slab right outside his back door the day before he reported his wife missing. Sure enough, they dug up that area and found her body. What was really stupid is the neighbor told this information to the police as soon as he heard the wife was missing, then again 2 days later, and they did nothing with it until he went to the press. OMG, the fact the cops were told a tip twice ABD didn't at least follow up on it makes my blood boil. The little town in Oregon I used to live in, we had a state rep and state senator who were married and been in their office for 10-15 years lifers, so it was rare anyone ran against them. Their last election they registered to run, and then 15 minutes before the deadline they announced they were dropping out and their friends announced they were running, effectively ensuring that no one else had a chance to get on the ballot. The reps claimed they had no idea, but that state passed the law named after them called the Howitzer Law that if a sitting official stepped down it extended the period others could enter to prevent this. That's a pretty big deal when even the other state legislators are pissed off at you for doing that. They usually have each other's backs. Worked for state legislators. I wasn't from there, but I was living in town when the Dee Dee Blanchard case happened. A woman with Munchausen's by proxy medically abused her daughter to convince the community that the daughter had terminal everything. The daughter played along until her internet boyfriend came and butchered the mom. Gypsy Rose is apparently adjusting very well in prison. I had to go and look this up. I stopped after reading the intro section of the Wikipedia article on this case. One of the teachers that worked in my school invited young boys to sauna and raped them. We had a substitute teacher who was well liked all over the district get arrested for soliciting sex from a couple 13-year-old boys. He seemed like a nice guy, a little weird, but nice. He'd tell us about his nephew who committed suicide because of extreme depression. He'd always cry about it. It came out later that his nephew committed suicide because he raped him. It was really horrible. Dude, my small town seemed like it was a place for suicidal people to end up and do the deed. I can't count how many people committed suicide. It is weird. My neighbor Kevin, his wheelie bin was stolen over the weekend. It's been the talk of the village. Police have been and taken statements. No further action taken. A professor from our small community college was shot and killed by his son with a crossbow. Also some high school wrestlers waterboarded another student, and all they got was a suspension from a wrestling match. A girl hid her entire pregnancy, all while having her boyfriend at the time try to literally beat her into a miscarriage. She eventually gave birth in her bathroom, hid the baby in her closet, then went and had dinner with her mom like nothing happened. She ended up killing the baby, putting it in a duffel bag with a bunch of stones and throwing it in a quarry. And what happened to her? How did they discover who had birthed the baby? This happened on Monday. A car, a large truck and a motorcycle were involved. Motorcyclist was looking at his phone on a dual carriageway, crashed into the back of the truck. Truck was so busy looking behind him that he hadn't realized he was about to hit a taxi. It was a fucking disaster. 4 people were involved, 1 survived. The whole front half of the taxi was literally flattened. Nothing this major has happened in our town since we've been living here, almost 7 years. The whole motorway was obviously closed and we got home about 30 minutes late. There must have been about 25 police cars there, and even an air ambulance was there. I've never seen anything like it. People are still talking about it now. People who don't even live in my town are talking about it. Riding a motorbike is dangerous enough on its own. Why the fuck would you have being distracted by your phone to it? Some dude didn't pay his grazing fees for like 30 years and had a standoff with the BLM and the FBI. A girl I went to school with got knocked up by a fellow student at the age of 14. Because 14-year-olds are known for making exceptionally good decisions, see the previous sentence, she decided to name it Holly Davidson. Because why not? It's not really a scandal or a secret, but somebody keeps writing Jesus loves you on the main street. I have no idea who it is and it's been going on for a year now. We had a dad who killed his wife and kids and then himself. The house was on the way to one of the big schools, so everyone went past the police tape in the morning, and again in the afternoon. Wondered if they'd ever managed to sell it since anyone in town could tell you why it was for sale. Ended up selling it to someone who opened one of those Ayurveda holistic practice type things in there, which always seems slightly ironic to me. I don't understand people who kill their families and then commit suicide. It seems like an unnecessary and overly selfish thing to do. How do these people go their entire lives normally, and then suddenly do something so horrific? So this isn't really a secret, but I must say, nobody knows this. My town's secret is we have the only Spangler's candy factory to make dum-dums. Not even kidding. All of it for the entire world and nobody cares. The high school principal got caught stealing an absurd amount of flower pots from Home Depot. This is absurdly innocent compared to the pedo and rape shit in the rest of this thread. There's a girl from my town that was kidnapped and found 29 days later. Kidnapped by 3 men who did some horrible shit to her. Her mom has really tried to push it for publicity, and she is going to be on the Dr. Phil show soon. She goes to my high school, and she always looks so sad. The sad thing is because her parent is using her for publicity, she will never have a normal life without people knowing who she is. I feel so bad for her. She's such a sweet girl who has gone through too much. Hopefully the girl will be old enough to move out or change her name soon. Sucks that she has to. Any decent person would be giving her solace in anonymity or the care of those close to her. There have been cases where victims end up killing themselves because they are known just as that victim of X from however long ago and can't go back to their lives because they worry what others think. I can't imagine making that worse by seeking to throw someone under the bus for attention. My town was incorporated in 1952 in an effort to keep black people out of the neighborhoods and schools. They used zoning laws and property taxes to keep low-income housing from ever developing. About 20 minutes away is a city with a lot of gang violence. It has 3x the national murder rate and isn't even a major metropolis. The chief of police of this little town was caught selling weapons and bulletproof vests to these gangs. For years. He was also protecting local meth labs. Worst part is, he escaped and no one seems to care. Edit. Please stop asking me where this is. We had a teacher allegedly banging a 14-year-old, and when the administration got wind of it, they were going to quietly fire him to avoid a shitstorm for everyone. He left school in the middle of class one day, went into the office, somehow got into our records room, and was caught on camera leaving with armfuls of God knows what. Nobody knows what happened to him. The government awarding several £million to a shipping company that would operate out of our town in the event of a no-deal Brexit. The company had no ships and had copied their terms and conditions from a takeaway. Wait, there's something gone wrong with Brexit. I don't believe it. You are part of Project Fear. Nice try, Mr. Soros. My school promised our science teacher a certain amount of money, but when payday came they didn't pay her the amount that was promised, so she left our school and we had no science teacher, just other teachers with science degrees. So an English teacher was put to science, a history teacher was put to English, a Spanish teacher was put to history, and Spanish was now being taught online, which must have been hell for that class. Well, that is the school's fault for hiring the teacher under false pretenses. I'm going to bet they even tried to guilt her into staying by saying, well, teaching is a passion and not about money, and think of the children. Though they were in the wrong. Teachers need to pay rent and eat too. Not really a secret, but Hudson NY has a really interesting shade of past compared to how Americana picaresque it is now. It started out as a town they would ship whales up to from Nectar to burn blubber. The smell was so bad that it became a terrible place to live, and brothels and gambling houses popped up everywhere. Kingston, which is just down the river, used to be the capital, and the aristocrats would use Hudson as their Las Vegas. The Hudson Main Street, Warren Street, is one of the most beautiful Americana-looking small town streets I've ever seen. It's just funny to think all the beautiful old Victorians and brick buildings that line it were whorehouses. Pic of Main Street, Warren Street, Main Street of Town of Hudson, New York. Phil Haber photography webpage. Apparently it had the catchphrase "the little town with a large red light district." Honestly, the whole Catskill Mountain Range and Hudson Valley and its towns has a sort of eerily beautiful and dreamy-like quality. I highly recommend anyone go visit in the summer or fall. Please. Since there is a ton of trendy new restaurants up there now, it begs the question how long it takes for the fact that your establishment used to be brothel to become a cool piece of trivia and not absolutely revolting lol. Outside of Warren Street, Hudson is still very much a shady place to be. Wouldn't be surprised if there were still a few brothels. In my town about 2 years ago we had a Dropbox fiasco where kids in the higher grades had a massive Dropbox full of female students' nudes. Last year in my school we had swastikas appearing all around the campus along with a shotgun shell. The day after they found the shotgun, the school decided to put everyone in the gymnasium. The dumbest decision I've ever seen. About a year after I graduated high school, a local girl a couple years younger than me went missing. Turns out her boyfriend killed her for trying to break up with him, and he buried her in his grandmother's garden. My hometown had more murders than I was comfortable with, and from a wide range of bizarre reasons. 18 lesbian couple murdered one of their grandmothers because she was forbidding them date. Racial killings. Adultery killings. One guy even murdered his girlfriend because he thought she was possessed. I moved out of there ASAP. Lived in a small town of under 1,000 residents. 2 brothers from overseas came to our small town to be the local doctors. Both were married and brought their families with them. Within 6 months I noticed a very noticeable change in my local pharmacist. She had received very large breast implants. Turns out the doctor and pharmacist were having an affair, and he bought her breast implants. Everyone in town knew, and they would often frequent local sports games or town social events, even though he had a wife and kids back home. We had a serial killer that murdered multiple women, and seemed to dump them in the country off 7 Bridges Road. He's suspected of killing at least 10 women. commented a while back on a similar post, but here it is. In my old town, there was a giant drug operation. I'm talking helicoptering drugs across the Canadian-American border. This guy had mob ties. He ran a roofing business, and it was only when he suddenly started buying really expensive things like cars and clothing did the police get tipped off. I'm talking a town of less than 1,000 people. Apparently he made and processed drugs in his warehouse, and would fly over the border. No one caught on because his place was pretty secluded up in the mountains. One of the guys who was in the scheme killed himself by hanging with bedsheets, but it's pretty much known in the community that he didn't kill himself. Someone most likely killed him. It's weird because one of the guy's moms ran the general store. I have memories of going there with my parents and getting candies. Another dude and his girlfriend were murdered a few hours away, which police think is connected, but the murderer was never found. Really crazy for my little town. Here is the story if anyone is interested. CBC webpage. My mom's hometown. The local Gino was sticking his dick in instead of the metal thingy and basically having a good old time molesting unsuspecting women. Luckily my GMA knew of the rumors about him and never took her daughters to see that doctor. Others were not so lucky. And X200B, Chicago Tribune, we are currently unavailable in your region webpage. Went to high school in Paradise, California, the town that almost completely burned down last November. The town had multiple disasters waiting to happen years before the fire, and city officials did nothing about it. The town was the largest incorporated community in the US without a sewer system. Every single house and business was on a septic. This was terrible for the town economically. When septic tanks under businesses got old or cracked, most of the time the owners didn't have the money to replace them, so they just closed down and left the building vacant. It was also a public health hazard. One of the middle schools had a well-used soccer field directly on top of their septic leach field. Right near one of the goals was a spot where raw sewage seeped out of the ground when it rained. Part of the reason fire evacuation was such a nightmare had to do with a misguided attempt by the town to solve a long-standing pedestrian safety problem. More than one kid had died trying to cross one of the main drags. The town was barely planned, and was laid out in a disorganized web of branching, disconnected roads that had few crosswalks or sidewalks. It was a pedestrian nightmare. So what did they do? They narrowed one of the main ways in and out of the town and installed more flashing crosswalk signals. One lane of traffic was converted to parking. The town was not a place you could safely or effectively drive through. The only evacuation route that continued up into the hills was partially paved, unmarked, and windy. There's no way in hell they should have been telling people to drive out that way, but hundreds of people did. This prolonged evacuation times by hours. Various people kept promising over the years that this evacuation route would be improved, but it never happened. On the day of the fire, the early warning system failed. And all over the town, the only way people were being notified to evacuate was via a landline call. Dozens of people only found out about the fire second hand. I have no doubt there are lawsuits already in progress over this. Not a super small town, but there's a trendy bakery cafe hangout type shop in one of the suburban hubs here called Greens & Company. In 4 years it has continuously been graffitied to read Greens & Cock. Whenever they try and remove the graffiti it turns up again a few days later, so they've just given up and have left it to say Greens & Cock permanently. Nobody knows who is doing it. The police chief got paid overtime his last 3-year super illegal, and that was what his retirement was based off of. Then we elected him to a judgeship. My school's French teacher had an affair with a history teacher during a trip to France. Her husband found out about it and came to the school screaming, "How many times did you fuck my wife?" to him and a room full of 8th graders. The history teacher's wife was pregnant at the time and lost her baby from the stress. Not exactly a small town, about 100,000 people, but one of the local high schools has an unusually high amount of sex offenses. About 8 years ago, a coach killed himself days after being questioned about whether he had an inappropriate relationship with a student. About 2-3 years after that, a female teacher was arrested for having an explicit relationship with a student. About 2 years after that, a wealthy man in the area was found running paying numerous high school girls from a few schools for sex, with at least one girl being from this school. And just a few days ago, another teacher was arrested for possession of child porn. This is all at one normal-sized school, not the district. Only the wealthy guy incident involved other schools, in less than 10 years. Our mayor literally just got arrested by the FBI, like 3 days ago. I think it was for misuse of campaign funds. I guess he had a lovely trip to the Caribbean. He's allegedly a wife beater too. Cops showed up to his place a couple times because his wife called. There's other stuff too, but that's the biggest one yet, and it's super recent. Our mayor, a woman at the time, would buy clothing at the local herbages, remove the tag, then reattach the tag to another older, but similar looking price of clothing. After that she would return the newly tagged item for a refund. As I recall, she had to resign in disgrace. This was maybe 15 to 20 years ago. EDI, grammar. This one is half funny, half sad. Here is the kettervatch, which means cowfucker in Belgian French. It's funny how everyone knows of him. Some saw him do the deed FRM far away, or walked away, but he roams freely like it's normal. Have you ever seen the Canadian show Letterkenny? It's about a fictional town in northern Ontario. There's a running joke not about the fact that this one guy fucked an ostrich, rather, a debate over how believable it was that he fucked an ostrich, what he could have fucked instead that morphed into an ostrich through the gossip chain, and the logistics about actually fucking an ostrich. The show is apparently spot on for, if nothing else, showing just how few things there are to talk gossip about in small towns. One day in the regional newspaper there was an article that explained that a 19-year-old kid fucked a cow so bad it damaged her and killed her. 3-4 days later the front page of the same newspaper was car chase with a tractor. A kid stole and drunkily drove a tractor and tried to escape the police with it. Do you see it? Yup, 2 days later we learned it was the same guy. I know the prosecutor's daughter and he said, he screwed up but his younger brother is way worse. A town about an hour north of here, local police were going around alerting farmers to lock their barns at night. Apparently someone was sneaking in and fucking horses at night. I shit you not. My friend had even sent me a pic of the notice. I wish that phone hadn't have died and taken the dock with it. I wouldn't say I lived in a small town, but in my town there was. Have seen her in a while and she is quite elderly. A woman who would walk around screaming and yelling "Don't touch me" and assholes and other profanities. That woman was sexually assaulted and the system basically failed her. She was left homeless and without proper care. She roams the streets, psychologically damaged and alone. When you ask people about her, they will mainly tell you she's crazy, you know, druggies, but that isn't the truth. The poor woman had much to endure in her life and simply broke. Often I want to try helping her in any way I can, but whenever people approach her she becomes scared and aggressive. There's a religious cult that makes up roughly 50% of the population of my town, 1,200 people. Low-key some things have occurred. Excommunication is one of their primary methods of dealing with people who don't follow their laws. There is a convicted cannibal in our town. Seriously. He killed his friend while being drunk, then ate his jaw. He had his trial, went to prison, but was set free because the largest political party in the country wanted to free their leader from the prison. Corruption, in a legal way. This meant that many criminals were pardoned. Also, he is a drug addict. He sniffed glue on a daily basis. Edit, spelling. The school system is fucked up. Guidance counselor stalked a student and tried to break into their house when they knew the student was home alone. Jail. Teacher went through a Burger King drive-through with his dick out while a student was working the window. Fired and no significant charges. 3-4 suicides per year. Average amount of people per grade was 100. Secret programs and fake classes to push failing students through the system to keep the school's high funding and state rating. There's probably more I'm forgetting. There's still an unsolved murder. The whole town and most of the next county knows who did it, but no one will come forward. It was a terrible story. Teenage girl vanished while in plain sight. Seriously, from the middle of the town, in a place where you got a phone call because your 17-year-old kid was walking down Main Street. What was he doing there? You couldn't blow your nose there without 20 people reporting the next day they saw you do it. There's only one genuine suspect. It really was kinda a done deal, but no arrest. It's a weird place anyway. 1/100th uber wealthy, the rest poverty level. This suspect was from the 1/100th of the population. The whole family owned half the town for generations. Suspect remains at large, although comfortingly was mysteriously beaten up a few years ago. He'd walked into a bar and made a joke about the missing girl. Case was on one of the TV shows asking for help solving it. There were billboards put up by her family for years and it's still a major source of scandal. Dirty secret indeed. In my town we have this place that people refer to as Nonya. It's just an abandoned house that's falling apart. But every once in a while drug dealings go on there. Because it's right next to a secondary school, loads of teenagers go there to get cigarettes, vapes, weed, beer, etc. But the teachers can't do anything because it's off school property. 3 suspicious spooky secrets actually. 1. The Spitfire that crashed into our local hills during WW2. The parts of which not many people know the current location of. 2. A long forgotten disbanded secret society that used to gather in a local pub. 3. The ghost of the first priest of our local church that was shot and killed by an arrow reel a long time ago on his doorstep. He was buried where he fell and, until the church burnt down like 30 years ago, was seen commonly around the church on weddings, funerals and christenings held at the church. There is also a story about a medieval statuette found in the old brickworks and a car that was found stuck in a wall. Tell me if you want me to research them too. Edit. Punctuation. Hope it clears up some miscommunication. Small town secrets from older countries are way more interesting than most in the US. This last election we had one guy get arrested for child porn and a chick get outed for selling her panties online. A big name politician from a certain party had a thing for people 16 and under. A pizzeria and a convenience store blew up about a year apart from one another in the 90s. No one charged, but basically every local my age or over knows who did it. We had an 80-year-old dude get arrested for walking around his pasture in nothing but a shirt and tennis shoes and fucking his cows. The guy who took all our school little league etc. pics from pre-K through 12th grade was arrested for child porn. In junior high we weren't allowed to carry bags of any sort with us to class. A gay kid brought his purse to class and refused to put it in his locker when the teacher told him to. Anyway, he got suspended or something after him and the teacher got into a big argument. The fiasco made statewide news and got turned into a discrimination issue, though I can't really say it was one. My great uncle was a mentally ill monster. He left his wife for a phone sex operator he was jacking to, was a huge alcoholic, and also had spent time in prison for running over an alleged pedophile with his car and killing him. I'm too young to recall the details of how he didn't end up with a life prison sentence. Years down the line, when he's an old man, his house burns down. Great uncle tells the cops he saw a man fleeing the scene. A big investigation is held, but no one is caught. It's a huge deal in my family, as despite him clearly being a bad person, he was fiercely loved by all his siblings and nieces and nephews. They all rally around him and being him clothes, food, furniture, money, et.al. He's a handy, rugged country boy, and builds a shanty over the rubble. A year later the shanty burns. Same story, same reaction. No one is caught. Family rallies around him. It starts to become a big deal in the community. People worry about an arsonist, and in a pre-internet era, most people don't know about my great uncle's past. He's basically known as the town character. A few months later, the third shanty burns down. Repeat the family reaction, and the story of the arsonist. But this time, as he's living with my grandmother, he has a breakdown and confessed to having burned down his homes, with all his and his adult children's belongings inside 3 times, all because he wanted the attention. Obviously a severe mental illness. This ended up being a huge family scandal, but the town at large remained unaware. I couldn't tell you why no one told the authorities. Sure, he'd be brought up on charges, but maybe he would have gotten some help. He ended up crashing his car on a DUI and losing his legs. Passed away a few years later after a prolonged illness. Both kids are in prison over meth charges. A guy who'd been convicted of pedophilia got out and went home. Half the neighborhood turned out to and welcome him back. Trapped inside, he came up with an escape plan. He set his own house on fire, with himself inside, and called 911. There was a large heating oil tank attached to his house, and if it had gone up it would have lit off the whole neighborhood. So he got quick emergency response to escort him out of the situation. But he wasn't in good shape when they dragged him out. Kinda reminds me of a smaller case at school. Guy got in an argument with his pregnant ex because he didn't want a kid and during the argument pushed her down the stairs. She was okay and the baby turned out fine. He proceeded to get beat up at least 3 times within the next day. He had to have security escort him to the Greyhound station to get a bus out of state. Small town justice can get pretty intense. FDR, the Vanderbilts and Mills, yes, serial people, all lived here. Too many secrets to list. Lol, there are a few towns along the Hudson that have those families' estates on them, but I'm going to guess Hyde Park. The adults in the town I grew up in didn't like us kids advertising we lived right next to Onion Town and always told us to never go there, for good reasons. Onion Town, New York, Wikipedia webpage, edit better link, NY Daily News, we are currently unavailable in your region webpage. There are countless stories like this. Teens going to drive up Onion Town Road and back and getting attacked by the residents and their cars wrecked. My roommate and his 3 friends got the windows smashed out, beaten with rocks and tires slashed. They shouldn't have gone in the first place, but yet all the parents were pretty pissed that dirty secret down the road became a YouTube trend. I wouldn't say Nottingham is a small town, but a while ago a crazy guy in a green outfit stole a bunch of money from the rich people in town. Well, I knew a girl from Amsterdam, that's where that famous child rapist, Austria, was from. He is called Fritzl and he was Austria's scandal for a lot of time. Horrible story. The priest of the town has a wife, with 2 children of 5 years, they were twins. There were 3 very dominant last names in my hometown of maybe 1,500 inhabitants. I imagine there being a lot of scandals and dirty secrets. I know of some people who were 2nd, 3rd cousins and married, but there's bound to be more and closer, related cases of incest.